Ok, ciao a tutti, siamo qui con l'ospite d'onore di TOHorror Fantastic Film Fest 2025, Neil Marshall, che ieri sera ha presentato al Cinema Massimo per la serata d'apertura la versione restaurata in 4K di The Descent. Ciao Neil, welcome in Turin and at TOHorror Film Fest.
Thank you.
First question. Last time we opened the festival with the screening of the newly restored version of The Descent. The film came out in 2005. How does it feel after all these years to see that your film is still so loved by the audience and remains so relevant in the horror world?
Makes me feel old and young at the same time. No, it's amazing. I can't get over the fact that, the film has a life 20 years later, that it should end up going to festivals in its newly restored form is, totally unexpected in a way. Obviously, I've followed its path over the last 20 years in terms of having that following, and usually every October kind of comes around again with horror lists and things like that. And just the fact that it stayed on these lists for years is really quite astonishing. When we made it, it was just a little movie that I was doing as my second feature, shot in the UK. We really didn't know what to expect for it, but everybody involved put their hearts and souls, into creating this thing, and it paid off. And that's a minor miracle, and I'll take it.
And what do you think of this new version of the film, of the restoration in 4K? Did you get involved in the process?
Yeah, Pathé sort of really dived into the process. I didn't hear anything for quite some time, but it's because it took a long time. They had to go back to the original negatives and piece the film together by eye, because it's all pre-digital. So it's all the original film negatives, and do it by frame numbers. And they put it back together from the neg. They went back and found the original elements from the visual effects shots, and they just restored the whole thing from scratch. And then later on, when they got to the point of grading it, that's when they brought me in. And I went over to Paris and sat with them, and we graded the whole thing. And we did some little tweaks, a couple of things that had been bothering me for 20 years, we were able to fix. So yeah, I think they've done a beautiful job. It looks incredible, and seeing it up there on the big screen again is just amazing.
The film is shot in the UK, as you just said, but it's set in a cave in the Appalachian Mountains in the US. In the film, what inspired you to make a horror film set in such a claustrophobic environment? And were there any personal experiences that influenced the writing of the story?
It's slightly twofold. The setting of the Appalachian Mountains is twofold, because there is a lot of caving activity there. There's a lot of caves there, and a lot of people go caving there, so it made sense to set it there. But also because the film was hugely inspired by John Boorman's Deliverance,
Oh, okay.
and that's set in the Appalachian Mountains. At the beginning of the film, they drive past a road sign that has bullet holes in it, and it's the Chattahoochee National Park. The Chattahoochee is the name of the river that they shot Deliverance on.
Oh,
So there's little nods and winks and stuff like that in there. The cave side of things, that came from when I was a child. I don't know, maybe like 10 years old. I was taken on a school trip, and we went down a mine. They would never take school kids down a mine these days, but us, they did. And we went down this lead mine in Yorkshire, and when we got all the way down to the bottom, they said, okay, we want everybody to turn off their lights. And we did, and for the first time I experienced pitch black, like you've never known it. You can wave your hand in front of your face, you don't see a single thing. And then they say, oh, by the way, there's like a 200-foot sheer drop just over there, so don't wander off in the darkness. And that stuck in my mind. That really stuck in my mind. And I had to come up with an idea for a horror film following Dog Soldiers. And there was also a thing at the time, there was a thing in the headlines in the UK, this thing called the Beast of Bodmin Moor, which was supposedly this big cat or whatever that was turned up on all the tabloid headlines. And the original concept was like, well, what if that had a lair, and what if it lived in a cave somewhere? And that kind of got me into the cave concept. And then I kind of dispensed with everything else but kept the cave, and thought this would be a great setting for a horror movie. And then my memory came back about, being in pitch black. How can I turn this concept into, and use the darkness in a cave to make a horror movie? So that's kind of.
Keep on talking about the descent. The descent features an all-female cast and explore themes such as loss, rebirth, and it's a literally descent into psychological darkness. Some have seen this as a metaphor for the difficulties women face surviving in a man's world. Do you think that's an accurate interpretation, or is it something you had intended at the time, or that emerged only later?
I think it's definitely stuff that's emerged over time that people have brought to the film. I'm fascinated by the interpretations that people have had over it. I've seen essays and theses and all sorts of stuff written about the descent, which is again just baffles my mind that this little film should come to this, and like people would do their graduation thesis about the descent and write books about it. Um, and there's so many theories. It's not for me to say which one is right or wrong. Just take whatever's there or what you bring to it. Because there's a whole other theory about that the crawlers don't actually exist. That they're a figment of Sarah's imagination and
Just hallucination, yeah.
yeah, and her psychosis brought about by the fact that she's on medication, and you see that she leaves her pills behind, and all this. There's this bits and pieces that are kind of hinted at but never explained. And I went along with the idea that I'd rather leave it ambiguous and let other people take what they want from it. So the fact that it was all female it originally came from me wanting to do something different from the all male cast that I'd just done on Dog Soldiers, and my research into the world of climbing and caving showed me that like there were these adventurous women who were going out there and doing it. It was not implausible at that time, and it was original. It hadn't really been done an all female cast in that kind of survival horror movie at that time, and certainly not treating them as in an exploitative way. Trying to make very grounded, realistic characters felt fresh and original. So, as a filmmaker, you want to try and do something new.
Yeah. And let's talk about the crawlers, the creatures in the film. Your work is full of monstrous beings. You started with werewolves in Dog Soldiers and went on to the mutants in the lair. Where did the idea for the creatures in the descent come from?
I always knew I wanted something in the cave. I mean, I'd just done one monster movie. I do love monster movies. I grew up with monster movies. I think they're great fun. So I wanted something in there, but I wanted, because I'd done creature suits, I'd done classic mythological creatures in the werewolves. I wanted to create something new, but based more around humans who'd mutated or evolved. I thought that's scarier than a guy, for the guys in suits are great fun, but I thought this would be scarier if the more grounded, the more human we make them, but that they are humans who'd evolved to live in that situation. And so, they had a few changes. They were blind and things like that. And how could I make that as scary as possible? So, yeah, it was all about just, the evolution of these creatures down there.
And judging from what we've seen, I'd say they use sound to hunt with, like a bat. And they've evolved perfectly to live down here in the dark.
And the design of the creature, where did you work actually on the design of the creatures? And
Well, my original thoughts were it would be like bumping into Nosferatu underground, which I thought would be kind of scary. That kind of gaunt, skinny thing. I was like, I wanted it to be like Iggy Pop. So they're all like muscular but skinny. He's not bulky, but he's very muscular, so you can see all the definition, but he's really kind of scrawny. I thought that was a good base. Like, could we make them look a bit like that, but pale and slimy, and then they're blind and they crawl around. So I was basically trying to invent some new creature for cinema.
well, people who have seen The Descent often say they were more frightened during the first part of the film before the creatures actually appear because of the overwhelming sense of claustrophobia and suffocation creates. What was it like to shoot those sequences inside the caves? Was everything built on set, or did you actually film some parts of the film in a real cave?
So there are no caves, real caves in the whole film. It's either miniatures, matte paintings, or sets. We did all, myself and the cast did all go caving in research, and did all the things that you see in the film, like hanging from ropes and roofs and abseiling down waterfalls and crawling through tiny little spaces just to get a real feel of what it's like down there. And we made the sets kind of as claustrophobic as we could. I didn't want large spaces for the sets. I wanted them to be enclosed and as small as possible so that we would have to crawl through tiny spaces. So the other thing was I figured at least maybe 2 or 3 people out of 10 are claustrophobic, and that's a pretty good thing to tap into. As it turns out, it's more like 9 out of 10, which is even better, and why the film resonates so much, that a lot of people are claustrophobic. And I look at the film now and I think it looks quite tame in terms of what we put the actors and what we put the characters through. If I was to do it again, I'd probably so the bit where she's stuck in the cave, aside from the fact that it's an enclosed space, it's kind of a nice dry space. Whereas you see photographs of some of these people doing the real thing, and it's like that size space, but it's half filled with mud, and then it's raining outside, and the mud's getting higher all the time, and they've got that. I was like, if I was doing it again, that's what I'd do now. I'd make it even worse, but it certainly is effective as it is.
As I said, this year for the anniversary of The Descent, also a dedicated book and the novelization of the film were also released. What can readers find inside this book, and could you share a particularly curious or interesting anecdote from the making of the film?
When I made the film, luckily, I kept hold of like storyboards and behind the scenes photographs that I took on set, and various things as an archive and old scripts and stuff like that. So the making of the book was a great opportunity to take all that stuff and just put it out there for people to see at last. Janine, who wrote it, interviewed many members of the crew and the cast and got all their stories, and then went into the whole script and the story in depth and interviewed me in depth, and just trying to give the audience, the readers, as much information as possible about how we actually put it together, how we shot the film in story. Once we got onto the stages, we shot the entire film in story order. So as we were filming, we'd kill a character off, and then we wrap that actor, and then they'd be gone, and then we'd kill the next one off. And slowly but surely, the cast got smaller and smaller and smaller until we filmed the very last shot of the movie on the very last day of filming. So that was the last shot that we did. And that's what's in the film, which is another good reason not to cut the ending off.
Even though you are credited only as an executive producer, The Descent had a sequel directed by John Harris. What are your thoughts on that film, and do you think it preserved the spirit of your original?
Unfortunately, I don't think it preserved the spirit of the original. They really should have fought much harder to tie it into the original, because it's very lazy that it just opens in a way that doesn't match either ending. I worked very hard to plan the lighting of the film in the script, sticking to rules about we could only light scenes with lights that the characters took with them, as it is in a real cave. And they didn't do that in the sequel, and therefore some of the scenes have to be lit. The cave had to be lit because there was nothing for the characters to light the scenes with. And I think that just a tragic, lazy thing to do, basically.
Okay. The Descent is pure horror, but after this film, you began exploring many different genres, from the post-apocalyptic doomsday to the thriller Compulsion, your last film, to the epic Centurion and the cinecomic Hellboy. The constants in your films are always action and a strong taste for blood and violence. The question is, what is your favorite film genre, and which filmmakers did you grow up admiring as a director?
I think the one thing that links all of my films is I've tried to get some action in there, because that's the film that made me want to make movies is Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is Spielberg, and that I came out of that film and I knew I had to direct films. But making a film like that isn't very easy. So I got into horror, but then I tried to crowbar action in whatever I was doing. And I think after Descent, I didn't want to be seen purely as a horror director, so then I did Doomsday and was given more money and had a lot more fun and doing action there, and then Centurion was a change again. But they said the common linking thing with that, Hellboy and everything else, is like trying to get action in there, because that's ultimately what I love. But the directors, people like Sergio Leone, we were talking about before, Sam Peckinpah, then you've got the Spielbergs, the John Carpenters, and people like that, James Cameron. But it's action, always action.
Keep on talking about directors, we are in Turin, in a city that is long associated with the master of Italian horror like Dario Argento, and who shot many of his films here in Turin, including Deep Red. What is your relationship with the Dario Argento and Italian giallo cinema in general?
My relationship with Dario Argento is that he once stole a taxi from me in London. When I was waiting for a taxi and I turned my back and I turned around and Argento jumped in and went off in the cab. I was like, "Oi, Argento!" But his films have been very inspirational. I love the style of his films. There's a sequence in Opera that I just absolutely adore, where the woman looks through the keyhole and then gets shot, and the bullet comes through, and it's so fantastic. And that kind of style just really rubbed off on me. But yeah, the giallo thing is what I applied to Compulsion. But my relationship to Torino, she goes same time but different genre. Goes back to the Italian job. That's my first awareness of Turin through that. So yeah, but that's action again.
Yeah, of course. And talking about Compulsion, there is one of the most thrilling blood sequences. I'm talking about the knife murder in the kitchen. That it's a scene that stayed with me for days after seeing it. And I wanted to ask you, in fact, if Argento and a certain type of Italian slasher was an inspiration for that kind of scene, because it was so cruel and so slowly and
absolutely. And I think it's probably my proudest moment in that film, because it was setting myself a challenge.
Because usually your killings are like fast. It's like explosion or people being chopped up and stuff. And this was a really strong moment. Like
in the script,
5 minutes or
it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a 5-minute one, and in the script it was just written as like they stabbed this guy to death, and sitting in a production meeting with the stunt coordinator, we got to that scene, and he said, "Well, what do you want for this? Like a 10-second, 20-second fight sequence?" And I thought about it for a moment. And I said, "Can you give me 5 minutes? And I want to do it in one shot, and I want to do it practically, with real blood in the real location." And so basically that just set everybody off like, "Oh God, how are we going to do that?" But practice. They rehearsed it. We got on set, we rehearsed it a few more times with the camera, and then we knew we had one shot at getting it. And because it's 5 minutes, so it's a long time for something to go wrong. It's very nerve-wracking doing those kind of shots. But everything in that shot was practical except for the blades of the knives. We added those in afterwards. But I thought it would be kind of realistic to have some guy who's like pumped up with adrenaline is going to take a lot more stabbing, and he slowly bleeds to death on the floor basically. But I just thought that might make a good sequence.
Yeah, and talking about practical effects, what's your because in your movies you prefer to use practical effects than CGI.
Always.
CGI.
Yeah, I mean sometimes you have to fall back on CG for whatever reason, but given the choice, I'll always try and use practical effects because they look better, they sustain better, they look real, they are real, and it's a lot of fun splashing blood around on set. It's like takes you back to being a kid in paint class where you get your hands dirty. It's just fun. But also like when you think about the great movie monster, because obviously I do a lot of monster movies. So you think about the great movie monsters, I always go back to like the original Alien, the original Predator, the original American Werewolf in London, the original Thing, all practical effects, and they all look as good now as they ever did. And I can't think of any like pure CG creation that like stands up as well as those two.
Another question about your directing. In The Descent and Dog Soldier, the spaces are tight and very confined. Yet we've also filmed spectacular wide-ranging ensemble scenes like in Doomsday and the battles in Game of Thrones. What kind of sequences do you prefer to shoot?
I really enjoy the big stuff. I love the epic action stuff, huge crowds or huge set pieces or logistics or special effects. Anything that mixes like weapons and explosions and vehicle carnage, whatever. It's like the bigger the better. I did the battle sequences in Game of Thrones was just like huge amounts of extras and stuff. I love orchestrating that big stuff on a cinematic scale. I think some directors are scared of that kind of stuff, but I don't know. I wallow in it. It's great.
And in the Game of Thrones episodes, did you have some freedom of write stuff for the battle?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it was great. When I first read the script for the Battle of Blackwater, the battle made no sense whatsoever. It was like 40,000 guys getting off boats and going and standing outside of one door, the castle gates. And I was like, say the first 100 are involved in trying to get the door open. What are the other guys doing? Just standing there? So that's not how a battle works. So I'm a student of military history, so I kind of knew a bit about how siege warfare works, and said, well, they're going to bring siege engines, they're going to bring ladders, they're going to bring grappling hooks and ropes, and they're going to bring archers and all this kind of stuff with them, attack on multiple fronts. They needed a battering ram, so I designed a boat that had a battering ram on it, and it got to the beach, and then they took the battering ram off, they took the boat upside down, put the battering ram, took it up to the gate and smashed the gate in with this thing. And so they could be protected from arrows from above. They built it for me, and it was like, and it worked, it made sense. So yeah, I got to do a lot of stuff like that. They were very open to making it look as realistic and epic as we possibly could.
We're approaching Halloween. Also, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the release of Tales of Halloween, for which he directed a hilarious segment featuring a killer pumpkin. Do you have any favorite Halloween film? What's your favorite Halloween film?
Well, it's probably Halloween. I mean, that's the classic Halloween film, and Trick or Treat is also great. But also things like Evil Dead 2, that bring a sense of fun to scary movies. I don't necessarily watch things like, I don't think The Thing is necessarily a great Halloween movie because it's very serious, it's very dark. Halloween's fun. So that's why we make Tales of Halloween, is like, it's scary, but it's fun.
Yeah. You just founded Art of Action, a production company, along with JD Duffield, that is with us today. Do you want to talk about this project?
I can talk a little bit about it. That myself and JD Duffield, we've set up a company specifically to focus on action and action filmmaking, based out of the UK, but potentially in co-productions with whoever. But we kind of like the model that 87 North have in LA, where they're doing really specialist action stuff, and we're like, okay, we'd like to do that kind of stuff because we both are writers, directors, and we both love action movies. I mean, we met at a screening of The Raid, because it was just mutual passion for like carnage on screen. So yeah, that's the plan. We have a number of projects that we're developing, but we want to push the envelope as far as not only action cinema, but certainly action film and television that comes out of the UK. It needs it.
Okay, and as a final question that is linked to this one, a classic one, what are your upcoming projects, and are you planning to explore a new direction, or is there a return to more traditional horror in the works?
Bit of everything. Aside from the Art of Action projects, I have a World War II alien invasion project that I wrote last year that I'm hoping to shoot next year, which mixes sci-fi, horror, action, comedy, all sorts in there. I'm writing a horror western, and couple of straight up action films. So there's a lot of irons in the fire.
Just one more question, and what are your thoughts about last night and the screenings, and what do you think about the festival and the city? You have fun?
Every time you come to a horror festival and it's just a great reception, you feel like you've come home, because you're finding people like you who love what you do and love the same stuff that you love, and it just feels kind of organically cool. It's like, just the audience last night was so enthusiastic and responsive, and it was just great to meet people who are just, they love the movie. So I'm so proud of that. And what a beautiful city to set it in. It was first time in the city, so absolutely loving that. It's great. Brilliant. Long live it, 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah, bring it on.
Ok, thank you so much, Neil, and
Thank you.
grazie a tutti.